Hello and welcome to Gruvi's first podcast. Well, not exactly first. It's been 4 years since we last did one. Unfortunately, we were getting into the routine of shooting a regular show each week, and all our camera equipment and sound stuff got nicked. So uh, here we are 4 years later, and currently we wanted to put this show back together again because we think that it's important to really discuss what's going on in our market right now in relation to exhibition, distribution, production, and streaming. So this show will be running concurrently each week. We'll be looking at the top news stories and discussing them with you, and also putting out a regular blog post to back up all the links that we find within the research that we're doing. So, getting straight into it now. Last week's major piece of news was the drawing back of the James Bond movie No Time to Die. This will be released in Easter 2021. It was obviously a major disappointment for the industry, but we're seeing a slate of movies being pulled back. I think the only major releases that we're beginning to see now are coming out in early December, late November. And this is primarily in reaction to the sudden spike in corona cases that are being identified internationally. I am hopeful. I've been looking at the death rate associated with the infections across Europe, and what I'm seeing is the death rate is not spiking in relation to the number of people who are being diagnosed as being sick. I also think that the amount of testing that we're doing now is far higher than we were doing at the beginning of the crisis. So essentially, I'm quite hopeful that by the end of this month, we'll start to see legislation and business processes beginning to really pick up and sort of change their approaches to things, which I think will be good for cinemas. So again, I'm hopeful, and the thing I'm keeping an eye on is the level of death, but also the number of people admitted to ICUs, which is freely available across the stats that we can see online. So one of the key announcements that we found interesting last week was that Disney Plus will now be releasing Soul directly. It won't be going to cinemas. This ties in, I think, with their strategy for Mulan. But the main difference here is they're not going to be charging a premium price for this product. It'll be part of the normal subscription service. Disney hasn't released any numbers yet, which I think is very interesting. The film didn't do well. It even got panned by the Chinese audiences. So until we know more about the actual economics behind this, it's very subjective as to how successful Disney's launch was. I can only say that Soul's release does seem to tie in with the idea that they're wanting to boost subscriber counts over the Christmas period. And I think it's a good incentive if you're just looking at it purely from the perspective of Disney Plus. The other major bit of news was the level of cinema closures that we're seeing across the world. Cineworld came out with a major announcement that it was shuttering all of its locations. That's 45,000 members of staff. We all feel very sorry for that situation. It's 536 locations with Regal in the US and 127 UK locations with Cineworld and Picture House in the UK. The main reason that was cited by the CEO was that the reluctance on the part of major studios to release their pipeline of new films. And there does seem to be a general hesitation from Hollywood as in what to do next, because traditionally Hollywood has looked at the east and west coast of the United States as the major ground for their productions. The world is now changing, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, but we're seeing that independent film is actually booming right now across Europe. Tim Richards came out with an interesting quote, and I think this is in line with what we're seeing with AMC. 80% of AMC's locations remain open. Odeon is largely open, but some locations are only opening for the weekends. Tim Richards said in a recent interview that it's hard to understand when 75 to 80% of the box office is generated outside of the US. And we are experiencing this huge pent-up demand from our customers. Why wouldn't studios want to monetize when they can and where they can? Roughly 75 to 80% of screens globally are now open. China, open. Asia is pretty much open. Europe is open. And Central and South America are opening. Our plea is, we're ready to go and we need movies. Tim then also backed this up with another interesting point that one of the positive outcomes from all this is that local film producers, directors, and distributors have seen an opportunity that has never arisen before when there are no Hollywood films. In Germany, Netherlands, Denmark, even Poland and Italy are seeing the independent sector scrabbling to finish films to get them onto our screens because they know they are going to have them to themselves. And that has actually helped immensely. So independent production, local market films are the main driving force behind bums on seats in cinemas these days. I think it's an important point to consider, particularly why the UK is been so badly affected, and also the US, is this reliance on Hollywood to drive most of the visitations to cinema. And we're actually seeing, potentially this sector grow over this period, which is interesting. Just to wrap up now, we have 2 comments or 2 questions for the audience. Feel free to reply in the comment section below this video. First question is, should other chains follow the AMC example, both in opening, but also, I think, interestingly, their move towards the 17-day theatrical window that's been agreed with Universal. This idea that the film comes out and then 17 days later it's free to move on to the into its home entertainment window. There has been some conjecture around some kind of revenue split between AMC and Universal. The details are still pretty cloudy at this stage. And this is something that won't be open to, smaller independent distributors across Europe, for instance. But I think it is an interesting move, and it's something that we should really be talking about. As we talk about this on this show, we're in the process of concluding some interesting research into looking at the release windows across most of the major European markets to see when films cross the line in terms of the number of tickets sold. And we'll be adding this information in to actually really then start to look at the release window, because it's something that we at Gruvi have been talking about ever since we published the book back in 2017 called Winning Your Audiences. Second question, should exhibitors make those films debuting on VOD available to watch on cinemas at the same time? And this is the idea of a simultaneous release, both to PVOD and to theatrical. Now, companies like Curzon in the UK, this has been their bread and butter for years, but it'll be interesting to see if this model crosses over to other releases, perhaps some of the Hollywood titles in the future. And, a lot needs to be done in this sector to really try and figure that out. I think one of the main points is tracking. Releasing onto premium VOD is less transparent than actually releasing into theatrical. It's a crazy, crazy world that we live in the content industry, but you actually get better data when you release theatrically, because at least you get the box office numbers 2 days after the premiere anywhere in Europe. When you release on PVOD through the standard services like Amazon, Apple, and iTunes and Google Play, you don't get the reports until sometimes up to a month later. And in Amazon Prime's case, it's up to 3 months if you're working with an aggregator. So if you want to read more about these stories, check out our blog post with all the links that'll be highlighted in the comment below. And have a great week. See you next week. And hopefully we'll have some great news to share. Thank you very much.